Good morning, everybody. Hi, it's Natalie from Creative Makers. So nice to see you. Happy Mother's Day for all you mothers, and happy Mother's Day to all the fathers that are also mothers. I hope you're having a glorious day and doing things you love. Hello, first person. Thank you for being here. Okay, so today I am speaking to Luis Jacinto, and I know for a long time I was calling you Luis. Sorry.
Okay.
And Luis is somebody that came onto my radar. Well, didn't even really come on my radar. We were introduced by Margaret Garcia, and he happened to be sitting for a workshop, he and his partner Kenny, and I had the opportunity to paint them both. And I've talked about this before. That I did 2 paintings of them, and they bought them both.
They're incredible. Incredible. We love them.
Thank you.
And everyone who sees them when they visit us, they go, "Where did you get those?"
That was a fun day. 2 fun days. Anyway, so that's number one how I met them. They became my collector, or one of my collectors. And then I bumped into them again. It had been a few years since I'd seen you.
Yeah, because that was before the pandemic.
Yeah,
the paintings.
Exactly. So now we're post-pandemic, I guess. And I bumped into them at an art show. That's also where I met Billy, and from last week's interview. And here's Luis. And Luis, I started looking them up because when you meet them, you understand. When you meet Kenny and Luis, but when you meet either of them, you understand that you're looking at art. You're talking to people that know art. You're talking to people that understand a very broad base of creativity, I feel like. And so I started just checking out his website and things. There's so many things I don't know here. So I'm just going to start with my first question, and then we're going to go into everything. So the question I always start asking in the beginning of interviews is, I want to know about, what did creativity look like to you as a kid? I mean, what were you doing? How did it start?
Probably with music, rock and roll, because I had older cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my mom would buy us kiddie records, like Disney records, things like that. But I had older teenage cousins who lived right next door, and they were listening to rock and roll records. And so that was, I think, I discarded my kiddie records and started listening.
Moved to rock and roll.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of rock and roll? What are you
Well,
talking about?
it was, the early 60s before the Beatles.
Yeah.
So it was the Shirelles and the Ronettes and Claudine Clark, Leslie Gore. It was all of, it was mostly girl teenage cousins that I had. So they were listening to all the girl singers.
The girl groups.
I love this guy, he broke up with me, all that.
And that was it.
Well, it was the beat, it was
Yeah.
the sound and the singing and everything. Yeah, it was great.
So then what happened?
The Beatles came.
Okay.
I was
that affected like everybody.
I was in the 3rd grade and the Beatles came. I remember we saw them on Ed Sullivan. I remember the next day, the girls in school at recess, they were all in a huddle saying, "Did you see the Beatles?" And the boys were around and peripherally around the girls. And, "Did you see the Beatles?" And, "Yes." "Did you scream?" "Yes."
Really? Wait a minute, 3rd grade? Because
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking 8 years old, basically.
No, it just,
Wow.
That's how boom it was. Because we loved the way they sounded, the British accents. They looked great. They had long hair.
Yeah, which was very different from what everybody was doing here at that time.
And the music, it comes back down to the music. The sound was different, everything. It was just wonderful.
Yeah. So are you a musician?
No, I love to sing, but I can't carry a note. But still, so I'll still sing, Not in a group or anything like that, but, I love music and I love pop records and all that.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. So move me through your life a little bit. How did that progress into what you did creatively?
Well, so the Beatles came, I was in 3rd grade. It was February of 1964.
These are pretty detailed. This is pretty detailed. Well, it was a big deal.
Yeah. So then later that year, in '64, by that time summer had come, and then I was in the fourth grade, and I went to go see A Hard Day's Night, the Beatles
Oh,
movie,
yeah.
which was in glorious black and white, and you could hear them not just singing but talking, which we love to hear. They looked great. They were dressed sharp. They had their long hair. They were funny. But at the end of that movie, during the end credits, they do a montage of solo shots with them wearing black turtlenecks like this one. And it's very rapid. Boom, 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 boom. Then the Beatles. Boom, 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 boom. Directed by, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember looking at those black and white headshots of them and thinking, oh my gosh, this is really something, you know. I was only in the fourth grade, so it didn't really click like, oh, I want to be a photographer or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would always think about those beautiful black and white images of them and the quick montage at the end of the. So if you haven't seen A Hard Day's Night or haven't seen it for a long time, go see it again. And you'll see what I'm talking about at the end of the movie. Don't fast forward to the end. Watch the whole picture.
The demand. The demand. You know what? But this just tells me what a giant impression this made on you. I mean, that you can actually focus on that one place and know that that was the ignition point.
And then what happened is my parents used to subscribe to Look magazine,
Mm-hmm.
which was a giant size uh, magazine that would come out. It was of all photographs. It had story, but it was told through photographs. And I would devour it. I would devour it. And somehow I knew that photographs could tell a story and, if needed, change the world to be better. And I would just devour that magazine.
Now, is that a realization you had in hindsight, or did you?
Hindsight.
Hindsight, yeah.
Yeah. Because back then I was just
Right,
devouring.
you were just looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just it's such a big thought, to know, to understand that pictures move that much.
Yeah, they do. They really do. And even today, yeah, I
Yeah,
still believe that today.
I
Yeah.
do too.
Yeah.
So okay, so fourth grade, you're finding the things that are making you excited.
You know, every night we would watch, or we'd sit down for dinner, and my parents would have the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite going. So we were always aware of what was going on in the world. And, you know, this is the 1960s, so,
Yeah, it was an active time.
Yeah. So, you know, and we always spoke politics. My parents always voted. Um, and even though I was from a small town, living in a small town, this was in Bakersfield, which is 100 miles north of Los Angeles for our non-California viewers.
Exactly.
And very conservative.
Yes.
But still, it didn't mean that we were isolated from what else was going on in the world at all. You know, we just knew. So we were always, and then, you know, I had older cousins that I mentioned earlier, and some of them were very politicized, and so I would look up to them and think, oh yeah, when I get older, I'm gonna, you know, I want to do something too.
Mm-hmm. So then now you've got two sparks running. It's like you've got this political spark running and you've got this creative spark running.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I know a teeny bit about you, I know how they do run together for a while.
Yeah. Well, like the political stuff, you know, besides watching it on television, but would always see it in the newspaper or or the Look magazine that would come to the house. I don't know if it came every 2 weeks or just once a month. I don't remember. But it was always telling us a story about social change, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was the combination of those two things.
So as you got older, did you figure out? I mean, did you get a camera? Or did you take some classes?
mm,
How did the photography thing come down?
well, before it was my senior year of high school, and I didn't have a 35 millimeter camera. I had a 110 Instamatic,
Hmm.
which were like this, very thin, and I guess the whole country had
Yeah, I remember. I had one. Yeah, and they were just, and you put them in your pocket, and you could
Yeah,
just shoot a little
yeah,
picture.
yeah. So that was when I tried to make arty photographs the first time. But I also bought a Super 8 camera, a used one. I forget where I found that. So I started making little Super 8 movies. You know, I had to do a senior English class project. And so I made a film where I have three sisters, and I had them act out this story about racism, but I had them wearing these giant paper mache heads that I had made. Um, and in the middle of the shoot, they said, "We're not doing this. This is, this is embarrassing," because I had them in the park running around. So I had to pay them $1 each so that they would not leave
So,
me
and they would,
halfway.
and they would wear your paper mache heads. Okay, wait a minute. I want to go back to the paper mache heads. So, I mean, that's an artistic endeavor that
Oh,
requires,
yeah.
a physical act.
Hmm.
Was that also a sideline? I mean, you were also involved in that art in that way?
Well, part of my English class senior year, we'd studied the Greek tragedies, and in those plays people wore masks. So I said, well, I got to connect my project, in this film that I'm going to present to the class to hopefully get an A, with what I've learned in the class. And I go, oh, well, I'll have my actors wear masks.
And therefore now it's tied to Greek mythology.
Yeah.
All done.
Yeah, so I did that and would make other little films. But so I graduated from high school, and then I started college there in town, and that's where I took classes in photography to learn how to develop film and print photographs in the dark room, because digital had not been invented.
Right, right. We were all doing the
Mhm.
send your film out to
Yeah,
be developed thing.
yeah, but I was and I remember the class had cameras that you could use, because I still didn't have a camera.
Yeah, they were so expensive back in those days. I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
it was a big deal to get a camera.
Hmm. Yeah.
So when in college, were you taught the basics, like how to compose a picture? Obviously you were taught exposures and how to make things more dramatic.
I remember all of those classes were so technical.
That would make sense.
And I also remember I never wanted to hang out with the other students because they just wanted to talk about f-stops.
F-stops and exposures.
And I wasn't interested in that. I was interested in trying to create a piece of art with the photograph.
So they didn't. So they genuinely didn't talk about composing the picture
I'm
and
sure, yeah, I'm sure they did, but the kids were the way I remember it, the kids in the class were more focused on the technical aspect of it,
so
which didn't
interesting.
interest me at all. So I
Do
didn't
you,
hang out with them.
do you remember what their work looked like? Was it less arty, so to speak?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
just like, here's a picture of my dog.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was beautifully exposed and
Right.
printed, but
Correct f-stops
but
used.
the subject matter was boring, I thought.
No, that makes sense. Well, it completely makes sense. I mean, I think just like anything, I mean, there are people that are looking to expand on something and people that are like, we want to know the right way to do it,
Yeah, yeah,
And sometimes they intersect and sometimes they don't.
yeah, yeah. True, true. So then I finished college in Bakersfield after 2 years, and then I transferred to Los Angeles to start my third year of college,
Where did you go?
Cal State LA.
Oh, okay.
And so it was the first time being away from home, which was great, of course. I think all of us like that. And so immediately I started meeting other students because I didn't know anyone in Los Angeles. And there were a lot of other creative kids on campus.
When you were in Bakersfield, did you feel alone in terms of creativity?
High school was really boring. You know, then I'm not friends with really anybody from high school. So I don't think any of you went to high school with me, but it was boring if you are. College was more liberating because it opened up. You know, I was able to meet different people and start being more creative, more myself, I guess. Um, so yeah, no, college. I loved college. I loved my
Yeah.
college years. Yeah, and then when I transferred here, um, like I said, there were a lot of people on campus who were very creative and went on to do a lot of great creative things. And but we met when we were just students, and we hit it off, and started doing our things.
Made your art gang, as I call it, the art gang.
Yeah, kind of. One of the first person I made friends with was a guy named Gerardo Velasquez, who later on went on to form a punk band called Nervous Gender, which was very influential. Um, but the reason he and I hit it off is because he had every album by Yoko Ono, and so did I. And I didn't know anybody else like that, really, except for my friend Victor from Bakersfield. He also had every Yoko Ono album. But it was great to meet someone in Los Angeles who also had that going on.
I bet that would have been instant kinship right
Yeah.
there.
And then a couple of years after that, punk hit. And so Gerardo and I both agreed that the kids finally caught up to Yoko Ono. And then Gerardo stopped. He cut off his long hair because he was doing his John Lennon Bed In for Peace look. So he cut off all his hair and went punk. And then we started going to the punk clubs. And we really liked what we were seeing and hearing. Plus, the kids looked like us. They lived like us. Everybody was broke. Everybody was poor. And by this time, I had a camera. And so I just started taking pictures of the bands. And then Gerardo decided to start his own band. I guess I kind of auditioned for the band because when punk happened, suddenly everybody started writing songs.
Right. Everybody's got a song in them.
So I played him a couple of songs I had written. He goes, the songs are great, but they're too pop, so I couldn't be in his band.
Oh, how funny is that?
But that was fine because then I just would go and photograph while we'd be out and about.
So, I mean, that's where the seeds of your punk roots are, right there.
Well,
I mean, it happened with music, but I mean, the interest in Yoko Ono and then finding this friend. I mean, now you've got a friend who's got a band and you're in the middle of the scene and you're taking these pictures.
Yeah. I had another friend who was in a band called the Motels.
Oh, yes.
And they were
much more famous, I think.
Yeah.
They got airplay and stuff.
Yeah, they did. But before that happened, they would play and play and play. And they weren't punk, but they weren't what was being played on the radio either.
Right.
They were still out there.
Alternative.
Yeah. But they couldn't get signed, so the leader of the band fired everybody and then rehired a bunch of new people, and then they got signed. But when their album came out, it was really watered down from what I remember seeing them live.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And so my friend who was in that band, he ended up joining another band called The No.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 3 guys, and the founder was a guy named Gary Valentine, who was an original member of Blondie.
Oh.
And he got kicked out of Blondie after the first album. So he started this trio. But they weren't punk. They were, guess what they called it was power pop. So it was like faster.
Yeah.
But it wasn't punk.
Still melodic, still probably a little bit mainstream.
Yeah. And they were around for a good while. They never got signed and eventually broke up after several years. But so there was the power pop, because my friend was in that, and then the punk, because my other friend was in that. But I felt more allegiance to the punk because when punk happened, it was really liberating. I realized that I no longer had to ask permission to do anything ever again.
That's
ever.
huge. That is huge.
And so I'm still punk today.
Of course.
I don't ask permission.
We were just Dave and I were just talking about that the other day because we were talking about Billy and how these are her roots too, and how the punk never leaves.
Yeah.
You know, once you have that idea that you're outside the box and that it's okay, you know, to be outside the box, that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think artists in general are punk, you know, because they're working outside of the box.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that happened in that time, one of the other friends that I made on campus when I moved to Los Angeles was this artist named Gronk.
Oh, yes.
And he was in a group called Osco, and it was 4 artists, himself and Patsy Valdez,
Mm-hmm.
Willie Hedon, and Harry Gamboa. And the 4 of them were doing all of these art things. They would have exhibits with paintings, but they were also doing performance art as well. And I would go see them. Now, I never became friends with the other 3 because they're like maybe 5 years older than me. And like when you're 19 and they're 5 years older, that's a big age difference.
Yeah.
So I saw them as these big art stars. So, you know, it wasn't for me. But, you know, with Gronk, because we had met on campus outside of his art thing, I was friends with him.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with the punk bands. I was not, except for my friend Richard and Gerardo, I wasn't friends with any of the other punk bands that I would go photograph. Because to me, they were these, and we're the same age, but to me, they were these big stars because they were on stage.
Yeah.
You know, and I was just this kid with a camera.
Tell me about the pictures that you took of the bands. I mean, were you taking pictures of them performing? Were you taking pictures of the audience? What was calling you?
Their performance.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to try to capture what I was seeing visually because not only was it the music and the different sound, but their appearance as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's different than the pop bands that were on the radio. And they were very dramatic. You know, the music was fast and loud. And the original punk scene, it wasn't about just destroy. It truly was about we're going to destroy and bring something new and better.
Mm-hmm. Right. It wasn't just getting rid of everything completely. I mean, there had to be
and then
rebirth.
walking over it. Yeah. So that was and I think because I wasn't friends with them, I was invisible to them, which allowed me to capture them the way I did.
This is really interesting that you're talking this way because, I mean, just before we started our interview, I was telling him that I always notice that whenever I see Lewis, the reason why I don't know him very well is because he's always fading into the background and just he's there, but he's watching everything. And here you are, you're using the word I became invisible.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really unique place that photographers hold, you know, when they're around whatever's happening.
Yeah.
They have to almost sort of meld in and just do their work they can't be a star.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Otherwise, you don't get the picture.
I have a few shots of some of the bands backstage.
Mm-hmm.
Because back then, you know, it wasn't a big deal. They were punk bands. Who cared? You know, mm-hmm. the people who owned or ran the establishments where they played, all they cared about was the big crowds that the punk bands drew, so they could get money in the door.
Right.
So you could just walk backstage, and because I would stay quiet and invisible, I would take pictures, and sometimes they'd see me, and then they would, you know, do their posing stuff. So I have pictures backstage of the original Go-Go's, of the Bags, of Nervous Gender, the No, but most of everyone else, it was always on stage, and you know, because I wasn't so much into the technical part, like I mentioned earlier, mm-hmm. My idea was to make, regardless of what I was shooting, I wanted it to be a piece of art. Now, whether I succeeded or not, that's the viewer to decide. But that was always my goal.
Well, I mean, you built a body of work. I mean, you were documenting the punk movement in Los Angeles at that time without even knowing it.
Yeah, I didn't see it that way. And in fact, in the early 90s, I decided to take a break from exhibiting.
Hmm.
Just for a couple of years, but it ended up being a 14 years, I call it a sabbatical
Hmm.
of not exhibiting. I was still photographing, I was still creating photographs, but I just stopped the hustle of trying to exhibit.
Let's go back to where the exhibiting started. How did you start to exhibit the work?
Um, the first show I was in was in 1980, and it was a show called World War III. No, it was the anti-World War III show.
Hmm.
So I submitted 3 photographs. I had photographed Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, and who was that third party candidate? Do you remember?
Perot?
No, earlier.
I'm a very bad political
Okay.
person.
Well, there was
Sorry.
a third party candidate who was
Hmm.
running as well. And so I photographed the 3 of them from the television, and then I printed that up, and then I put, where they're either reading, saying, or thinking, you know, I'm World War III, that phrase.
Hmm.
And I submitted those, and that was the first show I was in.
Wow.
So it wasn't even punk; it was something else.
Well, political punk.
Yeah,
You
I
know.
guess so. And then I just started exhibiting, and then I joined an art collective called LA Art, which was started by Mickey Kaplan. I'm gonna tag you, Mickey, so you can see this interview. Um, and he started this collective. I was asked to be in it, and he was able to open up art galleries in empty storefronts of large skyscrapers. So there was one in Encino, one downtown.
What year was this?
This was in the late 80s into
I was
the
going to say
early
because
90s.
you saw a lot more of this 10 years ago, maybe, and maybe even more now. But this is like the original pop-up idea.
Yeah, and he approached the businesses because there's something with the city of Los Angeles where if you're going to build a building, a commercial building, you have to give 1% of something to the arts.
Yes.
So he would approach the building owners that way and say, I see you have an empty storefront. We can have a vibrant gallery, for free rent. Um, and you can count that towards your, 1% or whatever it is.
That
And
was genius.
so that's how he would have these art galleries. And then we would go and we'd put on shows.
Wow. And so they would just stay up for a short period of time and then come down and then move on?
No, sometimes they stayed there over a year.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, we always knew that at any point we could just have to leave right away because he'd rent the space.
So you became part of that community
Collective.
that collective, and you would show your work there
Yeah,
often.
yeah. So we did that. But then towards the early 90s, I just decided to take a break from that.
Okay. Now we're to your sabbatical.
Yeah.
Right.
So 14 years passed. I didn't expect that to happen. And one day I'm cleaning the house, and I said, "Oh, there's my negatives." So I started looking through them, and I said, "Oh, these are good." So I saw that there was a punk photography show that was going to happen, and so I put together some photographs and went to the gallery owner. He goes, "Oh, this is perfect," because he goes, "I have 2 dark rooms in the art gallery. There was a photography gallery. And I'm getting rid of one of the dark rooms to make it another gallery space. So your work will be in there." So it complemented the other photographers' work because I had photographs of bands that she did not photograph and vice versa.
Oh, perfect.
So it told a more complete story of the LA scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, and also at that time, this was about 2005. It seemed like all of the punks were coming out of hibernation because after the punk scene ended, everybody just moved on, did other stuff.
I think too. I mean, the punk scene was often representative of a late teen, early 20s sort of time period in most people's lives.
Mhm.
And you sort of move on from that. You figure some stuff out, and you're like, okay.
Yeah. And like,
then,
I think for the bands, if they didn't get signed after years and years
yeah,
of trying, they did move on. Plus, the original punk scene changed, by 1980, 81, in the 80s, early 80s, the skinhead boy bands from Orange County were coming around.
this is true.
And that was all their, Nazi crap and all that stuff.
Yeah. So for those of you who aren't into this punk music scene, I mean, here in Southern California, there's a big divide between Los Angeles County and Orange County. I would say, right?
Yeah.
Los Angeles County tends to be more liberal. Orange County tends to be more conservative. And there was a large music scene coming out of Orange County that it was conservative, that it was also outside the box.
Yeah, and it was just these boys who were angry and
Yeah, harsh.
and
It was harsh.
they just wanted to fight and beat up each other, and they were just singing about destroy, period, no solutions.
Yeah.
And the original punk scene in the 70s here in Los Angeles, it was diverse the way the city is. Everybody was there in the bands and in the audience, boys and girls, gay, straight, and then every race and ethnicity.
Right.
That's just
it was
how
very
it was.
encompassing.
Yeah.
Yeah. All you had to hold was punk spirit. You didn't have to be.
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't have to be a particular way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm sorry. Continue.
No. So then after that, all the punks were coming out of hibernation, as I recall it. And then that was it. Once I had that first show, then shows have just continued. But one thing, especially I tell young kids when they want to talk to me, I go, you also have to work. It's one thing to create the work, but then if you just create it and it sits in your house, it's just going to sit in your house.
Right.
You have to do the hustle to get it seen and put it out there and all of that kind of stuff.
You have to talk about it.
Because those 14 years when I disappeared from the exhibition scene, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
Nobody called me.
Right.
So what happened is when I did return to try to exhibit, by this time the big difference was that the internet had been invented. And so at that time, it was MySpace was the big social platform.
Yeah.
And so I was able to reconnect with some of my old art friends. Where have you been?
Right.
And then and start making the connections again. And then the other thing that happened is there was some folks younger than me. I would say maybe 20 years younger than me. Who were suddenly in positions of being curators, art historians, writers, who were interested in what we had been doing in the recent past. So they sought us out.
Right. They were looking for you. They wanted to know about this and how you documented the time period.
And a lot of them were museum curators. So suddenly I'm in museum shows with my punk photographs.
That must have been quite an eye-opener.
Yeah. And they didn't do it blindly. I mean, they wanted to look at the work first.
Of course.
And they wanted to see it printed out. They didn't want to see like a draft copy because it was going to be on a museum wall and they weren't going to put up crap.
Right.
So I had to show them the good prints and everything, and they said, "Oh, great.
Yeah.
You're in."
So, I mean, besides the punk stuff, I mean, I had the opportunity to go on to your website and look at your work, and I was so mesmerized by the photos that you've taken of Disney Hall.
Oh yeah.
There's some beautiful photographs that I posted during the week that Louis had done called Los Angeles as a Woman.
The series is called "If Los Angeles Were a Woman,
Yeah.
This Would Be Her Diamond Ring."
Oh, I didn't see the end of that phrase. I only saw the first part of it.
Yeah.
But those photographs of Disney Hall and the curves in them really call that woman aspect to mind. Really so beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I see. If you're not familiar with the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles. Look it up on the internet. But it's not a square box or a tall rectangular building. It is all of these curves that, and it was designed by the architect Frank Gehry. And I remember when I first saw the building, I thought, oh man, this is, yes, yes, yes. So I went and I photographed it, not as a whole, but in sections. Um, and I thought, if Los Angeles were a woman, this curved thing would be her diamond ring.
Right, be her focal point.
It would be her diamond ring because it looks like carat diamonds, something. That would be her beautiful ring.
It is. I mean, the way the building's made, it's faceted and curvy, and it glistens in the sun. I mean, absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. Some of the images, it's a silver building, a silver metal building, but the photographs, some of them, the building looks brown, dark. And it's because I photographed it when it was cloudy and there were rainstorm clouds. So the building was reflecting back the dark clouds. That's why it came out brown and dark.
I think they're beautiful though.
Yeah, I love that. I love that series. Now, I've never been inside the building.
No?
No, because I'm afraid that outside it does not look like your standard square building. And I'm afraid if I go in, is it going to look like a standard square building?
It doesn't.
Oh, okay.
It does not.
So I'll have to go in there.
It does not. As a matter of fact, when you go in to hear a concert at Walt Disney Hall, the place where the musicians are set up, it's set up in a circle, and the audience is set up around them. So sometimes you get to only see the back of the performer, depending on, and it doesn't rotate, but it gives you complete sound, and the acoustics are amazing.
Oh, okay.
It's a really interesting space to see things because there's no hard edges.
Yeah.
It's he was very consistent in what he did there.
The photographs of that building is very different from the punk photographs. I don't shoot bands anymore. The last band I shot was in 1980 at a concert back at my old alma mater, Cal State LA. And it was December 3rd, 1980. And then 5 days later, on December 8th, John Lennon was murdered. And so when that happened, of course, you've heard my story about the Beatles and all of that, and Yoko Ono. So when that happened, I said, I'm done. I'm done with this.
Oh, really? It's so interesting to me that you have such a definite beginning point around that and such a definite ending point.
Yeah. Plus, like I said just a few moments ago, the punk scene had changed. The skinhead boy bands were coming in and not interested in their message or their music.
Yeah.
So that ended it for me.
So as a photographer, I mean, was this what you did for work? Did this somehow parlay into an actual career for you?
Well, a career as exhibiting, and I did work with, there was a magazine called Frontiers Magazine here in Los Angeles. I don't even know if they're still around, but it was a gay magazine, and so I was working for them and photographing assignments for them. I was also hired to be the official photographer for the Sunset Junction Street Fair, which was a community fair that began in 1980 and it lasted for 30 years. And one weekend each summer, the main strip through Silver Lake would be shut down, Sunset Boulevard, and the community would come together and celebrate each other. But it included the entire community, including the kids who were involved in gangs. They were not excluded.
I didn't realize that. How did they include them?
The first fair was in 1980. So in 1979, several people from that community went to the very first March on Washington for gay and lesbian rights. So they came back energized. And if any of you have ever been to a convention or something, for whatever reason, your work, you come back energized. Oh yeah, I want to do something, and then
you rah-rah.
But it dissipates.
Yes.
And you're back to watching TV every night.
Yeah.
And they didn't want that to happen. They said, we've got to do something with this great thing. So they looked around, and what was happening at the time is that the gang kids were beating up on gay people when they would come out of the bars at night and beat them up. So they were doing a lot of gay bashing. So they said, you know what, why don't we have a celebration and celebrate everybody in the community, including the gang kids, because they live here too. So what they did is they worked with some of the agencies in the community that worked with the kids. They had the kids, there were 5 gangs at the time, and they had them call a truce, and the kids served as security for the fair.
Wow, what a concept.
And so everybody was celebrated.
Wow.
Everybody.
That just gave me
Because it
goosebumps.
was everybody's neighborhood. It didn't belong to just one group. It belonged to everybody. So everybody gets to celebrate the neighborhood.
I was lucky enough that Dave and I lived in Silver Lake in that area the last couple of years that they did the fair,
Mm-hmm.
and we loved. I mean, it was walking distance from
Yeah.
our little apartment, and we would just walk there and hang
Yeah.
out, and
Yeah.
it was wonderful.
Yeah.
I was sad that it
Yeah.
got
So
closed down.
some of the photographs I took of that event, the couple of years I was their photographer, I love those images. So I kept doing that and kept exhibiting. But you know, I was not able to do photography full time to earn money to live. So I don't have an art degree. I have a degree in sociology.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I started working as a social worker. And you know, when I returned to exhibiting in the mid 2000s, I always thought, oh, why didn't I, you know, get an art degree and all that kind of stuff? And I would have regrets. And then one day I went to go hear a talk by a photographer, Brazilian photographer named, I'm going to mispronounce his name because it's in Portuguese and I don't speak Portuguese, but in my version of it, it's Sebastian Salgado, but I know it's
Yeah, they do funny things with some of their letters.
yeah, but he's this great photographer. He goes and photographs around the world, a lot of landscape, natural things, but also cities, all in beautiful black and white. He's amazing. He's my favorite. I went to go hear him speak, and he says, I don't have a degree in art. I have a degree in sociology. And I went, yes.
You were like my brother.
I said, I don't need to have regrets anymore. Now, the thing with sociology is that you look out and observe.
Well, which is exactly comes full circle to who you are as a person and what I observed about you from the get-go. You were just always, you know, I'm going to plaster myself right here and just observe, and that's what you do with your camera as well.
Yeah. So, you know, and I don't think I photographed the same thing over and over again.
You probably don't, but you probably do at the same time.
I do have a series like the Walt Disney. I think there's like 35, 37 images of that building. So in that sense, it's like, oh, well, you know, after number 12, you're like, well, it's the same building. But I think each individual to my eye, each individual image of all 37 of them are beautiful. They stand alone.
From what I saw, I did not feel like I was looking at the same picture over and over and over again at all.
Yeah. So that's done. I'm not going to go photograph that building again because it's done. So then I move on to the next body of work. You know.
Right.
So my website will have like categories that I made up to show that particular body of work that seems to be a theme together.
I saw that photographs of artists.
Yeah, I have a ongoing series of portraits of artists who I know and whose work I admire. Those are the two qualifications. I have to know them, and then I have to like their work. So if you're an artist and I know you and I haven't done your portrait,
he doesn't like your work.
It's not because I don't like your work, but you know, it takes time, and I have to, you know, I have a lot of images, but because I just don't have them sit and look pretty, I incorporate part of their art in the image.
I did notice that.
Yeah.
I did notice that.
Because I just didn't want it to be, I think pretty pictures are pretty pictures, nice portraits, but all of you other photographers are doing that, and you're doing a great job. I don't need to add to that. I probably wouldn't look. So, like for example, I have several pictures of my friend Gronk, the artist Gronk. Um, and so in one of them, he's sitting there at a coffee house, and next to him is someone sitting, but it's one of his murals. It has a human shape, but it's one of his murals. And that day when I saw him at the coffee house, he was there because he had painted a mural upstairs in the coffee house. And it was going to be the last day it was going to be up because they got new owners and they're going to whitewash it.
Ugh.
So I went and photographed it, and I photographed him. And then later I thought, oh, this will be my portrait of him, a cup of coffee with an old friend. So it's him and his mural, and that was going to be the last time. So that's how I try to incorporate the artist's artwork with them. Another artist that I love is Lee Salgado. She does intricate paper cutting work, just beautiful. So I have a portrait of her and her husband, Matt Gleason. But in the photograph, I made Matt look like he was made out of Lee's paper cuttings. So that's how that's the difference between just sitting pretty. And usually the pictures are just random shots that I take. I don't say, oh, I'm going to do your portrait. And,
Right,
right.
right.
I take the pictures, and then when I'm home, I go, what can I do with this guy or this gal?
I like that thought much better than having somebody like pose and I'm going to do your portrait now. So you also have a gallery.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. How did you get there?
Let me go back. I guess I always thought of owning a gallery and running it, and not necessarily to show my own work. So the first time I thought of it, I was going to hit up my dad for a $10,000 loan so that I could open a gallery. This is in the 80s. So when it hit me, and I thought, well, he'll lend it to me. The following week, because of Ronald Reagan's attempt to bust unions, my dad was laid off from his job. He worked for the railroad.
Oh my gosh.
And they fired everybody. My dad worked in the railroad yard. So they fired everybody except one person. It was like a loop where, okay, the union's still there, but as long as we keep one person
I
hired.
see.
And so my dad was out of work and by this time he was older. And he was out of work like for 5 years. Finally, the union, prevailed. But by that time, he was retired. But they had to pay everybody the 5 years of back pay.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, that was probably thwarted your $10,000 loan
That was
idea.
it. I go, nope. He's out of work. He's not gonna have.
He's not gonna. Nope. No money for me.
So I never pursued it. So then, as you all recall, it's July 2020. Remember July 2020?
Yeah.
I know where you were. You were at home.
Right, exactly.
You were at home with the rest of the world, at least the rest of the country. And so I thought, oh, I'm punk. I don't need to ask permission. I can open a gallery online. So that's what I did. I opened an online art gallery. It's online only. And
I wondered about that because I can't tell you how many times I went through the website and I was like, where is this place? Where can I see this stuff?
It's online only. What I decided to do was to give each artist a 3-month show.
Nice.
And it's solo shows only, no group shows.
Okay.
Because one time I went to New York, one of the museum shows I was in, when it opened in New York, I was there like for a week. And so one day I spent just walking to the local galleries and I wanted to see what they were doing. And all of the galleries I went to, it was either solo or 2-person shows. And I thought, oh, that's the difference, because here in Los Angeles, it's group show after group show after
a lot of group shows.
And a lot of times I felt whoever put the show, the curator would. It was more like telling their friends, "Come on, let's go put on a show," and doing it because they were friends and not so much because of the quality of the work. And so it was like, ugh. And then they would include their own work. I think it's so unethical if you're going to curate a show to include your own work. How can you be unbiased? So everyone's going to hate me now with those comments.
That's what
But
I'm giggling
those
at.
are my beliefs.
That's what I'm giggling at. I'm just giggling because it's such a true statement, you know. I totally feel you. I really want to I see that there's some stuff, but it's so far away, and I'm like, why? Oh,
Is it still not coming
I
out?
hate Facebook.
Is it coming
I
out?
think so. I think it's doing what I want it to do. Sort of.
Yeah, so anyway, I opened the art gallery, but with the intention never to show my own work.
That is so funny.
So I asked each artist for 30 artworks, and we opened the show with 10. And then because it's online, I didn't want everybody to see all 30 art pieces that first month.
Right.
I wanted them to keep coming back.
Oh, so you would do 10, 10, and 10?
Yeah.
That's a really great idea.
Yeah. And then the final month, with the final 10 to make the total 30, I also publish a catalog of the exhibit with an interview of the artist in each issue.
So when you say publish,
you have to buy it. You can't see it online. It's a physical catalog.
Like a physical catalog. Oh, that is such a good idea. I love that idea.
Yeah, because, I want a physical record of the shows.
I just wanted to say the comment that I kept seeing up there that I couldn't quite see, it was from Billy. And, and Billy says, another delicious interview, Natalie. You're a wonderful interviewer. Louis, you're a great storyteller. Okay, so I love, okay, tell me about the logistics of having the gallery. Are you getting, do you care about getting sales of any sort?
I want sales, and okay, so it's going to be 3 years in July that I've had the gallery, and the catalogs sell very well.
Oh, good.
That sells. The artwork, not so much. I think of all of the artists I've shown since it opened in July of 2020, only 3 artists have sold.
Anything?
Yeah.
That's such a shame, but I can understand.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing.
Yeah, you want to see it in person, but I think that by showing these artists, a lot of new eyes are seeing their work, and that's just as important to me.
That's really interesting. When you do the catalogs, are they set up like magazines? Or are they set up like softcover books?
It's a softcover book.
It's a softcover
Yeah.
book. How large are they usually?
At least 90 pages because it's 30 images, plus the interview, the artist interview, and the artist statement.
So you really get an in-depth view of the artist, right?
Yeah, I think so.
That's actually quite lovely.
Yeah. So I've been doing it. I plan to keep doing it. I really enjoy it. The artists have been great. It's easy to handle one artist at a time, because I feel like dealing with artists is like trying to herding cats together. Doesn't work.
I was wondering where you were going with that one.
It doesn't work, but when there's one, at least you can try to corner it and get
right. You can entice it with some milk.
Yeah. No, but the artists, I love the artists I have shown. They've been great. I love their work. That's why I asked them to be in the gallery. And it's also been healthy for me, because if I wasn't doing that, then I would just be thinking about myself, and that's not healthy. But then I have to be careful, because then I'll think, oh, people are going to think how great I am because I'm promoting other artists. So I got to watch that too.
There's a fine line. You're great no matter what, Let's face it. I'm going to ask you this question, and that we just sort of giggled about why do you think it's unethical to curate a show and also put your own work in?
Well, if I'm curating a show, I want the best work possible to be in the show, and I can't include my work because I'm not unbiased about my work. I think everything I do is great, and that isn't the truth. So I can't include it. That's why.
It's a fair assessment and a fair statement. I just wanted to hear the words that went with it.
Yeah, that's why. Um, the only time I co-curated a show with Matt Gleason, who's an art critic and gallerist um, and art writer here in Los Angeles, and he asked me to co-curate a show of uh, my friend Gerardo Velasquez, who I spoke about earlier. And so we curated a show of his photography. He has passed on. He
Oh,
passed
he
away
did? Oh.
in 1992. So we did a show of his photography, but Matt wanted the photographs I had of Gerardo in the band during the punk days to be in the show. And I told him, I don't like including. He goes, yeah, but it's co-curating. So my part of curating is wants your work.
That's one
So
way
that was
around
the only
it.
time. That was the only time. Yeah.
I can completely see. It's a really it's a nice stand to take about curating your work and keeping your own work out of a self-curated show.
Yeah. I mean, that's just for me. And
No, it makes sense.
yeah, and I'm not saying that when I've seen group shows and the artwork of the curator is included that it's not good work.
Right.
I'm not saying that, so don't get upset at me.
No, but I completely I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, to stay third party. I mean, if you're the creator, yeah, I totally understand this.
Yeah. Anyway.
I very much get it. So, what are you doing right now besides Oh No Dream Gallery? Which, by the way, I'll put up the links for his website and the gallery so that you can see what we're talking about.
One of the most recent bodies of work that I'm doing, I haven't finished it yet. Um, there's an artist named Lynn Folks. Do you know Lynn Folks?
Yes, I don't know her personally, but I know her work.
It's a man.
Oh, wait a minute. Didn't he have a big show
at the
downtown?
Hammer,
Yes.
At the Hammer.
Yeah.
A few years ago. He's in his 80s, and I remember when I went to go see his show at the Hammer Museum here in Los Angeles. I thought, when I'm in my 80s, I want to still keep kicking butt with my art the way he's doing it. He does these images that look like someone's head has been partially whacked off with an axe or something. They're very strong. And I said, I want to do something that's going to make people think like, wow, this is blowing my head off. But I didn't reach it. The only thing I could come up with is I went to Beverly Hills and I photographed the mannequins in the high front, the fancy boutiques.
Mm-hmm.
Now, throughout the years since the 1970s when I started photographing, I've done a lot of self-portraiture. So I have hundreds and hundreds of self-portraits. So what I did with the mannequins is that, and they're mostly in black and white, my self-portraits. I would put my head on top of the mannequins.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my way of saying that finally, after all of these years of being continuously bombarded with advertisements that say, if you have this outfit and this body size and this haircut, you will finally be complete. So now I am. I was able to put my head on those perfect bodies. So when I travel, I go to the high-end boutique areas of those towns, photograph the mannequins, and then I come home and put my heads on them.
Do you do that with Photoshop?
Yeah. So I have Beverly Hills, San Francisco, London, New York, Mexico City, and I've also done some stuff that same theme with. Sometimes a museum will have an exhibit of, I guess, somebody who designs clothes. Like, for example, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art had a show last year, was it, of Alexander McQueen, who makes clothes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I have Museum Row also. So I did it in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles museums. So I thought that that series will end when I go to Paris and get those mannequins. But then someone said, no, no, go to Paris, but you also have to go to Milan.
Milan.
So
I would
two more
agree.
cities. So I'm trying
And
to
I
get,
mean, you could argue London as well.
well, no, I have London.
Oh, you have
I
London.
have
Okay.
London, yeah. So I have two more cities to do, Milan and Paris. So I'm hustling up grants. So far, people aren't getting it. But the part of the series is that some of it is funny because it's my head, and also because I have so many self-portraits, none of the heads are repeated. They're all different.
And also different states of age,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So some of them are funny, some of them are grotesque, and some of them are beautiful. But I think it really shows how unfortunate it is that we are forced in a subliminal way to alter our appearance to try to look like that.
Yeah.
And we end up looking grotesque anyway.
It is definitely an interesting conversation in regard to social norms,
Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, the juxtaposition of it's my male head on top of this female body.
Right.
There's a few male bodies that I think from San Francisco where a couple of the images are of men, but everyone else is female.
Right. But you're attacking so many things
Yeah.
in these photographs.
Yeah.
You're looking at so many aspects.
Yeah. So that's
world.
Been fun. I've enjoyed that series.
I can't wait to see that one.
Yeah, it's on the website. It's on the website.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, it's called My New Body, period, of Work.
Oh, I'm gonna need. I don't think I looked at that one. I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to go in and check it out. All right. Well, I think we're getting close to the hour mark here.
Okay.
Let me see.
With Mother's Day, there's been no audience, which is fine.
Well, there's been a couple of people, and Billy says that the mannequin photos are my very favorite. She loves those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have? I mean, this has been a magical conversation, honestly, from my point of view. I really feel like I got to get in your head for just a little bit and understand like how it all sort of transpired. I don't always get that opportunity, so I wanted to say thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
Do you have any last words that you want to share with the audience about anything?
I don't know if I said this. It would be two things. If you're younger than me, I'm 67 now. If you're younger than me and an artist, stay healthy, keep creating, and when you get to my age, you too will have a very large body of work. The other thing I want to tell you, if you're in college right now, in art school, or even if you're just young and just starting to create stuff, make sure that you care for that artwork. Make sure that it doesn't get destroyed or damaged or ruined. When I was at a show that opened, it traveled, and when it opened at the Williams College Art Museum, the curator was also a professor at that college, and he told his students that were there at the opening, he said, those of you who are creating art, care for your work, care for it and take care of it. And then when it came my turn to say a little something about my photographs in the show, I said, what your professor just said is so true, because these photographs that you're looking at that I made them when I was in college. And look at this, they're now in a museum. I took care of them. So you take care of your work, no matter when you make it, always care for it so it doesn't get destroyed.
Good point. Okay, lovely people. Hi, Anne. We're signing off now, but hopefully you'll catch us in the rerun. Have a beautiful Mother's Day or a beautiful day. It doesn't matter. And I will see you all next week. Bye.